we should be live any moment.
Thank you.
I'm ready now.
Oh, yes, I've forgotten about those. Okay, it is 5 o'clock and I will call this meeting of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee to order. And we acknowledge today that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the earth and vital contributors to our society. And before I call for a adoption of the agenda, I'd like to just bring to this committee's attention something that has been on my mind, and that is from our procedural bylaw, items 3.4 and items 4.13. And item 3.4, and I quote, is, "The chair shall preside over the meeting, including the preservation of good order and decorum." And item 4.13 also reads, "Attendees shall not engage in telephone or other conversations or any behavior that may be considered disruptive." And it is disruptive to have members of any committee quite clearly taking part in communications that lend themselves to giggles or smirks or chuckles when nothing particularly funny is taking place at the meeting. And I recognize having our meetings on screen like this virtually really lends itself to doing other things in the room. And I confess that I have succumbed to the temptation to do things that are not directly connected to the meeting myself, and I'm trying to be better. And I'd like you to join me doing that. So if we could just please refrain from, I don't know, watching cat videos or TikToks or texting during our meetings in accordance with our procedural bylaw, I think that would be really great. And we could all focus on what's taking place in front of us. So that said, I have moved by Mayor Saunderson and seconded by Councillor Comey that the content of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee agenda for July the 6th, 2020 be adopted as amended with item removed C 2020-08, the public notice policy. And so I am looking for comments on that and then looking for a vote. Any comments, errors, or omissions on our agenda tonight? All right, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? Super, that is carried. Business arising from the previous meeting. Is there any business arising from the previous meeting? Lovely. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, we're moving on to deputations. And we are, I believe, expecting to hear from Margaret Adolph. She's in the waiting room, I believe. And she, of course, is the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and she's going to tell us about the draft strategic multi-year accessibility plan. And we welcome you, Margaret.
Yes, I'm here. I guess you can't see me, but I'm here.
Wonderful.
Okay. Do you want me to start, Councillor McLeod?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Madam Chair McLeod, Vice Chair Comey, Mayor Saunderson, and Councillors Madigan and Berman, and all staff members. I'm here with you this afternoon to present the highlights of a draft of the Collingwood Strategic Multi-Year Accessibility Plan for 2020 to 2025. Before I begin, I would like to thank Clerk Sarah Almas for her wisdom and expertise in helping the committee produce the strat plan for these years. Of course, the committee consists of myself, Vice Chair Heather Gassman, Marlene Erst, Robin Sheldon, Rosalind Steele, Vanessa McDonald, Cheryl Ann Monaghan, and we can't forget Stephanie Cochran, the recording secretary, and Jennifer Parker, the coordinator of community and well-being and inclusion. So, Chris, next slide, presentation of overview. We're going to be talking about the requirements of the accessibility plan, Collingwood's commitment to accessibility, the plans, the goals, the plans, the commitments, and the public engagement. Quite a plan. So why do we need a plan? The next thing. Well, under Ontario's accessibility for Ontarians with a Disability Act, we all will know it as the AODA, all public sector organizations, as well as private and nonprofit organizations with 50 or more employees must develop statements of commitment to accessibility and make them publicly available. Create statements of commitment to accessibility and develop a multi-year accessibility plan and update them at least once every 5 years. And that's what we're doing. Next slide. So here is Collingwood's commitment to accessibility. I think it's a good one. The town of Collingwood is committed to providing persons of all abilities consistent opportunity and access to all town goods, services, and facilities, while ensuring that policies, procedures, and practices are provided in a timely manner and address integration, independence, dignity, and equal opportunity. Next slide. Why is accessibility important to Collingwood? The town of Collingwood has recently adopted our community-based strategic plan with a vision that people thrive here, live more now, which includes an inclusive, multi-generational, artful community with strong civic pride. Collingwood appreciates that most people of all ages and abilities want to stay active and be involved through the accessibility municipal programs, facilities, and services. Accessibility Advisory Committee goals, well, there's two primary ones, and the plan includes both new and continuing commitments to achieve an inclusive multi-generational community. The two primary goals are increase the visibility of accessibility and the AAC to help integrate accessibility into a full range of town initiatives and services. And number two, to emphasize the importance of the universal access for all people throughout the community, advocacy and awareness. Two great goals. Now we have a number of commitments we're going to look at. Commitment 1, accessibility customer service. We want to work with staff to foster excellence in accessible customer service delivery and work collaboratively to develop strategies and continuous improvement. Review the customer service policy and common service standards to identify opportunities to enhance accessible customer service. I think customer service is most important. Ensure notice of all service disruptions are provided appropriately and including any alternative facilities or services available. Encourage more digital online services that are easily accessible. I think this is going to be very important, especially now. It'll be even more with COVID-19. I think there'll be more digital online services, and I think we have to encourage more of that, especially for at my age group who are not familiar with computers and iPads and things like that. Mandatory staff training to support excellence in accessible customer service. So our expected outcome would be an accessible Collingwood that includes ensuring people with disabilities receive quality goods and services in a timely manner, supported by effective policies, procedures, tools, and resources that promote accessibility in customer service. And I can't emphasize customer service. So commitment 2, again, communications. Promote the accessible plan through various easy accessible formats. Monitor the town's website. Engage Collingwood. and social media platforms for accessibility. I know a lot of people go to the town site or the website. Ensure that digital services are designed with accessibility as its core. Ensure that all forms are accessible by 2022. Provide consistent notices in public spaces and online notifications to the public regarding accessible formats and communication supports upon request. Prepare quarterly a local and regional accessible related factor story for dissemination by the town's communication officer. I think people want to know what's going on. Explore American Sign Language training opportunities. As you've seen in COVID-19, every time there's COVID-19, we see the sign language being used more and more. So what are our expected outcomes? Enhance accessibility as it relates to communication. Tools and resources are available to effectively develop information and communication in an accessible format. Now we go on to commitment 3, accessible employment and workplaces. Collingwood has done a great job on this because I know of some people who have been given accessible workplaces in Collingwood town. But we should review human resources policy in consultation with human resources manager. Evaluate our recruitment and accommodation practice to ensure that employment-related policies and programs are evidence-based. Attract diverse talent by applying an inclusive lens into all recruitment processes. Build accessibility awareness through resources for staff and how to respond to the needs of employees. Promote principles and practices of respected workplaces. Promote employees assistance program to support employees. I like the employee assistance program. I remember in the 80s when it first came in when I was with Family Services, and it's a great program to support employees. Expected outcome, qualified people with disabilities are provided equal opportunity for employment, engagement, and advancement. Accommodation practices will ensure people with disabilities are able to participate fully and meaningful as town employees. We go on to commitment 4. I have to point out that in the past few years, we have seen a great improvement into the transportation services. However, we propose the following: meet with the Trails and Active Transportation Committee annually to review opportunities and challenges. We can always improve everything. Support transit as a more accessible, affordable, convenient, and safe mode of travel. I think with some of our aging population, this is really important. Provide input and support staff in acquisitions for services and transit needs, and work with the Public Works and Engineering Department to understand opportunities and challenges and to obtain driver feedback. And I like the driver feedback because he's the one who's on the road all the time and he sees what's happening. Communicate accessible transportation opportunities into regional transit links, the links. So our expected outcome would be Collingwood continues to support and promote transportation services and active transportation for people that are barrier-free. I know right now people are really reluctant with COVID-19 to not use, but hopefully we'll pass that and we'll be able to increase the transportation services. Commitment 5, enhancing accessibility of public spaces. We hope to provide guidance to improve accessibility design requirement with goals to move to our universal design principles. When constructing or renovating municipal facilities, ensure all features such as elevators, doors, washrooms, parking, furnishings will be accessible and appropriate accommodation available. Continuously improve the physical accessibility of all our service areas. I think we've done an excellent job. Most of our buildings in Collingwood, as everybody knows, go back to about 1835, and there was no such thing as accessibility back in 1835, I don't think. Expected outcome, greater accessibility into, out of, and around municipal facilities and public spaces. This includes incorporating accessible retrofits where possible during renovations. Now, I have to tell you that I'm a little bit older than some of you people, and when I walk in the park, I see they even got more benches there. And that's really good because now I can sit down instead of walking too long. Okay, and we want to do more of that. Commitment 6, accessible procurement. Communicate and define to vendors their obligations to meet accessible requirements. Support and promote accessible and electronic bidding process. Promote ongoing mandatory procurements training that includes accessibility requirements to educate employees on a common understanding of obligations under the AODA Act. What do we expect? A procurement program that considers the needs of people with disabilities and to ensure that goods and services at government facilities are accessible. Become barrier-free. Will be also improve the opportunity of doing business with municipalities for all suppliers, including those with disabilities. I have to point out too that we don't always see people with disabilities. A lot of people look very normal, but they have things that we would suggest are disabilities, but we don't see them. So here, the final commitment is 7, the governance and policies. We're going to invite the mayor. It says on here, it says and/or, but I like to have and. Chair of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee and CAO to attend an AAC meeting. I think you'll enjoy coming. Review and update the barrier complaint policy and promote its use. Okay. Determine the best solution regarding accessible advice and guidance in the site development program. In accordance with the community-based strategic plan, objectives of the enhanced public trust, the committee will schedule an annual public report to the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee. We promise to let you know what we're doing, okay? Encourage local businesses to enhance their accessibility. I like that. I think we should encourage all businesses. As I said before, a lot of the buildings on here, Ontario Street especially, are older buildings and they weren't built with accessibility in mind. Annual review of capital projects, programs, and services. So we expect to clear roles and accountability at all levels of the organization. Employees are supported to identify barriers to accessibility and actively seek solutions to prevent and remove them. Accessibility incorporated into a site development program. The town strives to ensure that its residents and visitors of all abilities can visit and enjoy this community. It's a wonderful community. We want everybody to enjoy it. The plan includes an inventory of a number of these facilities, programs, and services, which include both indoor and outdoor spaces. These spaces provide accessibility features to ensure that everybody is included. So we want to see public engagement. Public sector organizations must develop their accessibility plans in consultation with people with disabilities. I think everybody agrees with that statement. We want to ensure that the public and stakeholders that have an interest in the town's accessibility plan have a forum to provide input before the plan is finalized in September. So we want to present we want to present a presentation to the committee at AAC. We'll finalize, engage the Collingwood page, circulate to various agencies like Breaking Down Barriers E3, Community Services, and anybody who's interested in Collingwood. Communicate plan to the public through newspaper, social media, town website, and direct feedback. After feedback is received, the committee will review and update the plan as needed and present to council for final approval. I think all of you have received with your minutes, I think the plan, as it's a number of pages, and hopefully there's more information. Hopefully you'll be able to read through it. And so let's change the way we think, talk, and act about accessibility and inclusion. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to share this strategic plan for 2020 to 2025. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adolph. That was fantastic. I believe we go to the public at this point, and I'll look to the clerk to clarify that for me if there are any members of the public who are interested in having a few questions regarding this presentation answered. Is that correct, Clerk Almas?
That's correct. We have a few attendees. And again, if the attendees present wish to speak to the draft plan, they should either indicate by raising their hand through the feature on the bottom of your screen or type your question in the Q&A spot. And at this point, it doesn't look like we have any comment with respect to this plan at this time.
Excellent. So we'll get the conversation about it, if there is any, rolling by getting this on the table with that we receive the plan, or do we, if there's questions, do those come before we vote, Clerk Almas?
If there's any questions through the chair, if there's any questions in advance, we can address those before the committee votes.
Do any members of the committee have questions for Ms. Adolph regarding this plan? Vice Chair Comey.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Adolph. Well, first a comment. Thank you for such a thorough presentation. That was absolutely outstanding. Something, I apologize, I couldn't see slide numbers, but I made a note. There was a goal of making forms accessible by 2022. Can you give us an example of forms that are inaccessible? Is it because they're paper? Or could you, I guess I'm saying, could you kindly explain that to me, what it means for a form to be accessible?
Sorry, through the chair. Margaret, would you like me to address that question? I see Margaret is on mute right now.
I'll mute.
So as she remains on mute right now, I'll provide just a quick update. So in the actual details that's identified in the plan, it's to ensure that all of the forms on our website are fillable PDF forms. So they all are in, all of our forms currently are in accessible format pertaining to font. However, if we change all of our PDFs, and there's not many left to go. However, we wanted to make sure when we did have some department head feedback, we weren't positive that we could guarantee all of them would be complete by 2021. So the committee has agreed that they would like that commitment and action completed by 2022. And that's basically ensuring that they are fillable and people can submit them electronically versus having to come into the town facilities to drop off forms if they have any sort of concerns with mobility. It's just an easier access for them.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, through you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. And I like Margaret made this great point too, that there's what's happening with COVID is now having an overlay into the accessibility world where they've been asking for so many of these things for so long. So hopefully it gives a push to get some of these to the finish line. And Madam Chair, if I could just offer a comment. I was delighted to see the idea of meeting with the Active Transportation and Trails Committee annually. I think that's a really important synergy. Perhaps there'll be opportunity to meet, more often. It seems like this would be a great meeting of the minds on that topic. So just a comment on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Comey. And Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't mean to cut you off there if you had a comment. Okay.
I do, but I'll go last.
All right. And I was very excited to see the installation of the disability launch for all craft for all abilities down at Harborview Park. So that's an exciting part of making all aspects of our community accessible. So congratulations to your committee, Margaret, and your leadership for spearheading that. And I did have a question. You mentioned advocacy and awareness, and I know you've done a great job at raising awareness over the last 6 years. And I'm just wondering, on the topic of advocacy, are there any topics that you see coming up in the future for opportunities for advocacy for the committee?
I would like to ask Sarah if she would like to comment on that. Sarah, do you want to see? I think there's always room for improvement in anything we do. So Sarah, I'll let you go ahead because we talked about that at our last meeting.
Certainly, through the chair to Mayor Saunderson. The committee, the primary focus of the committee has been looking at municipal program services and facilities, but knowing that through the AODA, they want all businesses to be compliant by 2025, the committee felt it was very important to get out in the community, even though we don't have a direct jurisdiction to govern them on their accessibility features, but just ensure that they are aware of their requirements to comply, and if they need any sort of support or guidance, that the committee is there for them.
Great. Well, we're certainly here to support the committee in that work. So thank you very much.
Any other members of the committee with a question for Ms. Adolph? Okay, I have a couple actually, and one of which is a comment actually, and I'm delighted to attend one of your meetings, and I'm certain I can speak for the mayor on this occasion and say that he'd be delighted as well. I was wondering what was meant in this draft report regarding American Sign Language. Is it that you are thinking that there may come a day when, as we have seen in updates that are being given by, say, the Premier of Ontario or the Governor of New York, that there is a person translating into American Sign Language at our council meetings? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, Ms. Adolph, or perhaps Clerk Almas.
Certainly, through the chair. Margaret, would you like me to address that question?
Okay, sure I would. But one of the comments I'd like to make, I think that there's that population is left out of council meetings personally. And as I said, if we've been watching COVID-19 on any channel, whether it's CNN or CBC or anything, there's translators all the time. So they're trying to incorporate everyone, not just people who can hear and see and so, but Sarah, you can, I know, Sarah, we talked about this at the committee, that there is that population that can be left out of your council meetings, for instance. So Sarah, would you like to continue on?
Certainly, thanks through Chair McLeod, as well as our Chair of our Accessibility, Chair Margaret. So basically, we did a trial through the Elvis Festival of doing American Sign Language at the festival, and it was very successful. And since one of our commitments is a focus on customer service, we want to look at doing some staff training to ensure that we have customer service representatives in the various facilities. I know the library has expressed some interest as well as within our own corporate customer service. So if there's an opportunity to enhance that experience, and I think that is something that's going to trickle down into a number of our events, including our workshops, including potential council meetings in the future. So baby steps.
Lovely, thank you. My other question is just to Ms. Adolph. So this is a draft report that we've looked at tonight. What happens next?
Well, as I pointed out, we have to go to some of the breaking down barriers, E3, and get some input from the public. as to, and obviously from the council, from your committee, as to whether you think this is a good thing to present. I think it's excellent, but I have a prejudice here. But anyway, I'll let Sarah talk a little bit more about if there's any further things regarding letting other organizations see it, because it affects Collingwood as a whole. Okay.
Certainly through the chair, what we're going to be doing is having an Engage Collingwood page. So we're going to encourage people to review the plan, provide their feedback, see if there's some specific areas. We've kept a lot of our commitments quite broad, but if there's some specific community areas that any sort of stakeholder or individuals or organizations have any concerns with, that they think that we should really be including within the 2025 plan, then that's something that we will gather that feedback over the next couple of months and present back to the Corporate Community Service Committee. Any sort of changes, if there's any changes, if there's no changes, we will be going directly to council with what has been proposed.
Super. Thank you very much, Clerk Almus, and thank you very much, Ms. Adolph, for joining us today. And I think that brings us to the end of our questions. And so I'm going to move by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan that council support commencing the public consultation period for the draft strategic multi-year accessibility plan. And those in favor say yes. Super, that is carried. Moving on, my screen has gone to sleep. We are into staff reports, and 6.1 is Melissa McEwig, the manager of Human Resources, and she is going to bring forward a staff report regarding the closure of municipal offices during the 2020 holiday season. Hello.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. So thank you for that introduction. Yes, this report is being brought forward to committee to request approval to close our municipal offices during the 2020 holiday season. Generally, there's little demand for administrative services in late December, and in several of the last few years, we've closed the administrative offices between Christmas and New Year's, and there's been no negative impact to the public. This also afforded our fleet and facilities people with some opportunity to do some maintenance in the offices when there were no staff about. And for 2020, we also thought this might provide some respite for staff that have been working throughout the period, and for them to use some vacation time that they may not have otherwise had the opportunity to use. So the report is requesting that municipal offices be closed starting the afternoon of December 24th. And we would reopen Monday, January the 4th. Basically, staff would have to request 2.5 days to cover that period. So there's 2.5 days between Boxing Day and New Year's Eve that would have to be covered. The report provides an anticipated level of operations for that period, with customer service counters being closed. So in the report, you will see kind of an anticipated level of service to be provided. But I do have to let the committee know that there's been some subsequent discussion since this report was provided for the committee. So transit passes, for example, can be purchased at the library. At this time, they cannot be purchased on the buses, but we continue to look at the potential of being able to sell these passes online. With respect to bylaw services, there will be one bylaw officer on staff and a second one on call to be available if needed. And we realize at this time, realities may cause us to adjust these levels of service, but we were bringing it forward now to provide staff and administration some time to plan as best and as early as we can. We will update council by the end of November as to what our actual service levels will be, and so that we can issue public notices by early December so that the public understands what is available and what may not be. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public who are listening in? There we go. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Terrific. And so I actually do have one. So if a staff member does not take the 2.5 days, do they just get it anyway because the office is closed? How does that work?
Through you, Chair. So what would happen is if they don't have time off to cover, they are still welcome to work. So whether that's in the office and we're just not closed, we're just not open to the public.
Got it.
Or whether it's working from home and still checking in with their supervisor, we would still allow them that opportunity.
Terrific. Thank you. And I must say I'm a little annoyed at you for bringing this today because it's so hot and lovely and no one wants to think of the snow. Seeing no questions from other members of the committee, moved by Councillor Madigan and seconded by Councillor Berman. Staff report HR 2020-02 is moved to be received, and council approve the closure of municipal offices during the 2020 holiday season for the period of December 24 through the afternoon of December 31st, 2020. And all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
After staff reports, I have to get back to my agenda. We are looking for reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And I believe we're just going to have this, unless somebody wants to pull an item, we are going to just introduce these 4 reports as one thing upon which we will vote in its entirety. And so I'll just bring those to the table. So moved by Mayor Saunderson and seconded by Vice Chair Comey that the minutes of the various committees and boards below provided be received and recommendations carried are contained therein be approved. And that is the Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes from June the 18th of 2020, the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes from June the 11th, the Museum Advisory Committee minutes from June the 18th, and the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes from June the 11th, 2020. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? And Councillor Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I'd like to just offer 2 comments from the Trails and Active Transportation Committee minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is just a comment. It's within their minutes. It's items 7.3, and it's with respect to trail captains. And Chair Knowles noted there are currently 35 people monitoring the trails, and that Bob Miller has agreed to continue on as managing the trail captains. I just think that's an outstanding nod to our community participation and something really worth acknowledging. Those are some incredible volunteers. And the next one, Madam Chair, is a question. So it comes up in the minutes as item 8.2, and it's the Maple Street Bikeway. So it gets me really excited when we're saying things here like quiet streets and cyclists only. So perhaps through you, Madam Chair, to CAO Skinner, is it my understanding that this is then going to come to development and operations for further discussions this month? Or is this just contained within trails and we'll have to wait until it gets some legs?
CAO Skinner.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Councillor Comey. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with this particular issue and where it's coming next. I don't know if any of the directors on the line will be able to address this right now, and if not, I would be very pleased to follow up after the meeting.
Are any of those directors available to speak to that? I see none. No hands are coming up. Well, you'll get an update in due time.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I encourage everyone to read that item 8.2 Maple Street Bikeway. And it speaks to either a bike priority street or a quiet street along Maple. And it cycles us back in to master cycling plan. I don't even try, people, it just happens. All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
All right, and so voting on that, on the acceptance of these minutes, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. We have not had any member of the committee come forward to pull anything from the consent agenda. There is one item, and so we will move straight to the vote on that one, which is moved by Vice Chair Comey and seconded by Councillor Madigan, that the general consent agenda having been given due consideration by the standing committee be received. And that includes item 8.1, which is the Town of Fort Erie Essential Workers Day, March 17th. Those in favor? Lovely, thank you. Next up is our departmental updates. And there are actually two, although the agenda shows one. But we're going to start with Director Collver, or Executive Director, Acting Executive Director Collver, who has a presentation, I believe, for us. We've received it as email, and I believe that his PowerPoint is going to be put up on screen as well, which is a discussion regarding the accommodations at Town Hall and elsewhere. Director Collver.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody see that? Just like
Yes,
to make sure that it's up.
We can.
Excuse me. So I was asked to provide a bit of an update regarding where we're at for staff accommodations, and I think mostly related to returning to work post-COVID, or as we navigate the length of time of COVID. So really quickly, I think Council and the committee will be aware that accommodations for staff have been a challenge for quite a while now. We have people tucked into literally closets and vestibules, and it's been a challenge. And Council received a report back in 2018 called the Master Accommodations Plan, which talked about long-term planning for accommodations. And you'll remember a scary number of $20+ million in terms of long-term, the outlook for providing staff workspaces. But with COVID, we've actually kind of transitioned to some work from home successfully. And as I think not everybody is in love with the idea, but it definitely has been successful in that we've maintained the vast majority of town services. And there's definitely been challenges as well. People are living and working in awkward situations, and everybody's familiar with the COVID kids crashing the room behind you kind of video chat thing going on. But definitely, I think just the fact that we've been able to maintain the town services, I think speaks to the success and the resilience of your staff. Sorry, moving on. So right now we're working very hard to reopen Town Hall, and it seems somewhat simple, but there are a lot of things to be considered. Our Town Hall, unlike some in our region, has narrow hallways. It has very small collecting spaces for staff and the public. It's something that has to be kind of carefully navigated. We have to look at cleaning protocols and mask policies and general occupational health and safety concerns. We're talking about adding the risk of COVID into the situation. We have to reallocate spaces where we already had an accommodations concern with not enough room for staff members. We now have an exacerbated problem by virtue of we need more room to make sure that staff are separated from one another and separated from the public. We have to manage traffic control within the town hall to make sure that people are moving in a single direction through spaces and not having to bump into each other or bump into each other rounding corners. And then we also need to figure out how to reintroduce public services that are delivered in town hall and make sure that the public is safe as well as our staff. There's a work from home policy in development right now. It's been through department heads, and we're still working on the details of it, but it is something that will give us some guidance as to how can we maintain those members of our staff who can work from home and have been doing it successfully, and where it's fits with their job, and also fits with somewhat with their expectations for how to successfully do their job. There's some technical feasibilities that we have to work out. Not everybody's internet connection is as strong as everybody else's. Some people have been given loaner laptops, which were actually in some cases on their way out the door. They were saved from disposal, and they've been used during the COVID period. So obviously that's not an ideal situation in the longer term. We have conducted a survey of staff, and we've done it from the standpoint of what are the job functions and could those job functions be managed at home. We also need to ensure that we're looking after, giving our staff the best opportunity to be successful in their roles, where they feel that there'd benefit from collaborating live on site, or other elements like that. Including mental wellness on the job. So we need to kind of put another filtration on this to sort of make sure that even though they can work from home, whether it's the best fit for that role. And there's other at-home support questions. How far does IT go to help people establish themselves in their home office? What is the town's responsibility to provide office equipment? There are lots of concerns and considerations that we have to put into play. Now, we are putting this into play in some form against a $20 million long-term plan, so there's some latitude there, but it's still something that we have to sort of obviously navigate carefully, and we'll be coming back to council with our findings and recommendations. So in terms of next steps, we're looking at finance staff being reinstalled ASAP. Right now in our current world, they do a lot of document handling, and it's difficult. And actually, truth be told, finance are in the building more often than many because they have this responsibility and requirement to do document handling. So we're looking to get them reinstalled as soon as possible. There'll be some space sharing, some schedule shifting, and obviously we've had to spread out some of the workspaces to make sure that we can maintain distance, but we're working on that, and that hopefully will happen sooner than later. Clerk Services, we've been plotting with Clerk Services to move to marriage license by appointment. There's been a huge demand for marriage licenses in the COVID period. It seems unrelated, I'm sure, but at the same time, it's an important function of the town provides that we need to get set up again so that we can provide these licenses to the public. The customer service counter at Town Hall remains closed. The library is working a little bit advanced from us in terms of reopening. The library has the advantage of some space to work with. Town Hall is a little bit more challenging, but both will be opening with strict guidelines, again, as soon as we possibly can. This will allow us to provide some payment opportunities and commission services at Town Hall. We're also continuing to review these plans. So as we bring people back into the building, we're learning as well. Nobody's ever done this before. We're learning as we go. So as we install people, we want to find out where conflicts might be occurring. Things like the mail room, which is a very common collecting point. We're looking at reinventing the mail process so that we don't have to have this collection point for all staff. But these are things that we're going to have to kind of investigate and move as we go. But we're looking to get council chambers open again in anticipation of the provincial orders being lifted and council being able to reassemble. What does that look like? How can that happen? I believe by now we've removed all of the filing cabinets that were loading up in council chambers for a period of time. So getting it ready for you guys to move back. We're also looking at how are we moving things between Town Hall and the library building. Sometimes, in some cases, so one of the plans that was happening pre-COVID was PRC was moving out to the 10th line, the second floor of the Parks building. Bylaw was planning to move into the space occupied formerly by PRC. And we have an opportunity with the way PRC had been was currently set up to maybe install information technology offices of their IT guys who are currently living in one of the smallest places possible. We also like to get building and planning back. I think this is one of the areas where they very much benefit from collaboration with their colleagues. So we want to try and see what we can do to get that back in a safe manner. I mentioned the PRC 10th line. And I think that just want to leave, this is the update with just the idea that we're kind of having to kind of challenge all of the assumptions that were made through the 2018 Master Accommodations Plan. Part because there's an opportunity to do so. We've now practiced work from home. We now kind of know what our capacities look like there. We also know a lot of the challenges that come with that. But when we're looking at, the longer term future of the town, use of spaces like the library space, use of spaces like town hall, 10th line, and also future buildings like a multi-use rec facility, for example, in the longer term. Those kinds of ideas need to be put into the run of the gamut of things to understand what is our best path forward now that we know and have this new piece of information to work with about working from home. So anyway, that's the update, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Executive Director Collver. Are there any questions from our committee regarding this report? Vice Chair Comey.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Executive Director Collver. I made a couple notes. One was, I apologize, has the survey gone out to staff, or is it in the process of going out to staff about their working from home needs?
So through you, Chair. Yeah, through you, Chair. We done one level of survey where we talked about, is it possible for you to work from home? And so this was a bit of negotiation, to say, between supervisors, managers, and staff to sort of figure out what could be done. And everybody understands that we're all trying to do the best we can with this. So I think staff were very generous in their responses and saying, yeah, no, I probably could. But we've also heard since then that people were, saying, well, but it's not really ideal for me. It's not really ideal for how I function in my job. So we've kind of committed to doing another layer of another filter to go out and see how would that change things. So if before you said I could work 80% at home and 20% at the office, if we put on the filter of what's optimal, in your opinion, based on the person doing the job today, we want to make sure we understand that before we commit somebody to being in an 80-20 situation or a 50-50 situation or a 100% situation, because it's really important. We want the town, you guys have the best staff on earth, and we want to make sure that they're continuing to live up to the standards and expectations you guys have of us. And that's going to require getting as close as possible to the optimal conditions for working.
And I thank you for that answer. And as a follow-up through you, Madam Chair, I suppose my question is, what immediately came to mind is something you touched on right from the beginning, which is what we've been talking about all along, is kids and working from home, or even elder care. And here we are in a position of not knowing much about future childcare options, or even what school's going to look like in September. So during this time of going back and asking again, I would offer, and I'm sure you've already discussed and talked about how staff can really manage those with younger. It doesn't really matter the age, for that matter. It's been a really, really challenging crunch for all. So I think, your council as a whole supports that and would be interested in knowing what staff is saying about those needs as we move forward. And then if I could, Madam Chair, as a follow-up on a completely sort of different topic, when you mentioned the library reopening, and this is more of a COVID question, are we going to be asking our patrons of the library to wear a mask? So
through you, Chair, the mask conversation is an ongoing and evolving conversation. We're currently working with the Simcoe Municipal District Health Unit on trying to understand what is optimal, what is the right thing to do. But we also are challenged by things like, vulnerable people who potentially can't wear a mask, human rights, AODA restrictions, in terms of enforcing and making this mandatory. Let's use that word. So I don't have an explicit answer for you today, but all of these things are being taken into consideration as we figure out what this actually looks like. Definitely, we've had lots and lots of conversations about it. We've had conversations that include whether masks should be considered PPE, which in large part they should not be. You're talking about source protection. So you're talking about, I wear a mask to protect everybody around me, they wear a mask to protect me, versus PPE, which is a mask to protect me. These are lots and lots of considerations about what masks actually do and what is the best chance we have for reducing that risk percentage when it comes to the transmission of COVID. But it's not an easy one because there are limitations and we have to be careful about how we navigate those because we want to make sure that everybody's respected and honored the way they should be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Comey. Mayor Saunders.
Yeah. I'm sorry, before Mayor Saunderson, if I could just speak quickly, and I don't mean to interrupt Mayor Saunderson, but through you, Chair, I just wanted to respond to that work from home concept in childcare. That's definitely one of our considerations, and I wanted to make sure that that was clear, that we're not sort of ignoring the fact that we have to stage people coming back in terms of, the absence of care. And this is where things like shift scheduling and changing shifts and allowing people to be flexible in the day and trying to figure out what's the best way to map staff onto the service delivery. We've talked about everything from, offsetting shifts, but also changing the hours of town hall to allow for later open, like us to be open later, and such creative things. Like we have to kind of break the model open a little bit in order to be able to navigate all of these challenges. So I just don't want you to think that the survey is about feelings. There are a lot of practical home considerations that we definitely have to navigate as well. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. Mayor
Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Executive Director Collver. The last point that you raised about the consideration of assumptions about longer term plans, it seems to me that kind of opens doors in terms of giving us some flexibility for longer term planning in terms of future facilities, like a potential multi-use hub, and also existing buildings that we have, which we may look at changing. So I'm looking forward to hearing back in the future on that. I know it's a door opener. I don't think you can comment now really on where that's going to take us, but it certainly gives us a broader perspective for our facilities and our accommodations. And we're going to be receiving a report on Wednesday about our asset management plan and our debt situation. So it all rolls into one big ball, but it seems to me that potentially here that opens some opportunities for us that perhaps in 2018 we weren't looking at.
Through you, Chair, you're absolutely right. The thing to understand here is that everything is finite. So even a work from home plan has a finite layer to it. So there's only so many people that can work from home and so many job functions that work from home, and the town is still growing in all areas. So we need to keep in mind that staff accommodation in the longer term, whether it be the 5, 10, 15-year time frame, we need to be careful, be cognizant and aware of all options, and that would include future buildings and plans that are sort of, in the offing, as it were. So you've hit the nail on the head that this is all part of the considerations for staff.
Well, we'll look forward to the discussion. Thanks, Dean.
Any other questions from members of the committee? I have one for you, Director Collver, or maybe more than one. Where are we at this point? You've got, this update for us, but there's going to come a day, and it might be sooner rather than later, like the 17th of July is being bandied about, is the day that the emergency order ends, possibly in the province. And I believe that will have implications for the work that council does in the chamber, because at that point we can no longer, I believe, is when the changes to the Municipal Act to accommodate the type of meeting that we're having right now would come to an end. Although perhaps there will be some accommodation for that. But have you been thinking through like what happens on emergency declaration day ending +1 and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so when it comes to the council plans, I'll defer to the clerk because she's got a firm handle on it and is very anxiously planning for what might happen. But I think from a staff perspective, so I'll leave the clerk conversation to the clerk. But when it comes to staff, I think our position is that emergency order ending doesn't force staff back into an untenable situation. So staff have to be safe. That's our requirement of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So we're going to make sure that happens regardless of when the orders end. We'll make sure that we have the protocols, PPE, everything in place that needs to be in place to protect staff. Now I'll turn it over to the clerk to talk about possibilities with the council chambers, because that one's beyond me, but I know that there's some serious consideration going on.
Clerk Almas, I didn't mean to make it about us. There's just one example of the thing of there's a deadline there, right? Like there's things that would change on that particular date, yes?
Yes, so through yourself as chair, just to let you know, Clerk Services has been watching this deadline very closely. There's been another recent piece of correspondence that's come out. I believe it might even be on the consent agenda for our SIC right now, that speaks to what council meetings will look like whenever we come back. The biggest concern being, like, we are able to separate members of council in the council chamber, and we could still have some participate remotely. We do need that quorum present, though, physically. But the issue is the public, and ensuring that there's still public access to our meetings, because we still have restrictions on gathering sizes. So we couldn't encourage people to the gallery unless those come down. So we'd have to look at kind of a joint electronic physical presence meeting.
I knew you'd be on it. Thank you. And back to, can I just squeeze mine in, Mayor Saunderson? And one more from me for you, Executive Director Collver. I am assuming that there is a mental health component for our staff as part of these plans, insofar as it's been bloody tough on some people to be isolated and alone and trying to keep up with their work and so on.
Yeah, so this is a big conversation and probably bigger than an update, but for whatever it's worth, the town has conducted 3 mental health sessions with staff in order to sort of offer the opportunity to check in and learn what the kind of challenges there are, as well as provide some support through a qualified therapist. The check-in has yielded that there is a lot of challenges. It ranges in scope from the loss of collaboration, the loss of face-to-face sort of pop-in inspiration that we get from each other while we're working separately, all the way to the feelings of isolation, people who are working, quite honestly, too hard because they're working long, full days and really don't know when to end because they don't have those kinds of signals anymore. So there's a lot of mental health consideration has to go into all of this planning. And certainly, as an employer, it has to be top of mind for us. This is sort of beyond sort of the delivering task, but this is up to responsibility as an employer. So for sure, it's a part of what we're thinking and how do we navigate this. I will say, just as a final note on this, so it's not doom and gloom, but that I think one of the great things that's come out of this is an appreciation for how much we need each other. I think that the sessions that we've conducted, the way we're communicating now, the support that all of your staff are offering each other, I think is a testament to the fact that everybody understands that this is tough mentally, and they're trying really hard to support each other. So I think it's absolutely essential that this is a key ingredient in how we return to work or return to the office, because we're all still working. But yeah, no, it's not. There's been an upside too. There's a silver lining, and I think it is that appreciation. You bringing it up alone is a silver lining because it shows awareness of council members for staff. So that's good. Thank you.
I sense that Manager McEwick has something to say as well, because I can see her up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To follow up on what Dean has mentioned, yeah, mental health is certainly top of mind. We have an internal staff Friday 5 that we help promote the employee assistance program and any other free resources, whether it be from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, federal government supports, the province making counseling available to families and children. All of those things are promoted. The other thing that we have done internally with staff is try to promote those opportunities to connect with each other. So things like travel talks from the library staff or online yoga sessions with one of our staff is, can teach yoga. We had the park staff, hold a session on how to prepare your garden for the spring. One of our water staff did how to unclog your bathroom sink. So it's been nice in that staff are connecting with each other on a different level. Some other skills that people may not realize that coworkers have, and so it's generated a lot of discussion and given people some opportunity to interact.
Thank you. Well, they do say the flip side of crisis is opportunity. So, Mayor Saunderson, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Clerk Almus, I just wanted to get a clarification. When we passed the amendment to the procedural bylaw, I thought we had broadened it so it wasn't necessarily just the provincial state of emergency, it also included the county. So I think we have maybe some flexibility there because I'm not sure what the county has the same tight timeline that the province does. But just if you can clarify that, please.
Certainly through the chair to Mayor Saunderson, that's correct. So we're watching both of them. And obviously, if one proceeds longer than the other, we are still, we can carry on without, or with our electronic meetings without physical quorum present. So that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. I'd forgotten that there was two of them in play. Any other questions from members of the committee? And we will thank Executive Director Collver, and we'll move on to what I guess is item 9.2, which I believe is Director Milanovic, because he has some, as no doubt we all know, is a very hot topic, which is what's been taking place in the very, 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 very busy Sunset Point and Millennium Park. Director Milanovic.
Evening, Madam Chair. So we're all aware with the COVID-19 restrictions in place, the province is limiting venues, facilities, and attractions from opening. Ontarians scramble to find things to do with their time, and with the heat wave that we are currently experiencing, finding a way to cool down jumps to the top of their list. Municipal parks and waterfronts have been a destination for most people trying to find affordable way to cool down in this weather. Municipalities are feeling the impact of the influx of additional non-resident users at their beaches and the parklands, and the effect that it has on the municipality. Extra people at our beaches has caused concerns with issues that are already hot topics of interest with local residents, i.e. garbage, overcrowding, parking, lack of respect for public plans. These problems are amplified with the presence of COVID-19. Law enforcement, park staff, EMS are directly affected by these issues. Many departments across the town have been engaged in the issues and are working toward finding a solution. Earlier this summer, PRC staff and a shoreline contractor better defined parking locations so that bylaw could better determine when the park was full and enforce parking. On Saturday, staff witnessed a large amount of visitors converge on Sunset Point. With patrons parking wherever they could, staff struggled to keep up with the demands set by the congregating masses. By mid-afternoon, Sunset Park was at maximum capacity, so staff placed barricades at the ends of Raglan, Huron, Russell, and Niagara Street with signs informing guests that the park was at capacity. The OPP also had concerns with the volume of people as they believed it was jeopardizing the safety of town staff, their staff, and the community. Bylaw issued free tickets for violation of the emergency order to groups of 21, 31, and 16, while the OPP laid provincial events tickets this weekend across the Blue Mountain and Collingwood areas, and attended 2 disputes at Sunset Park where bylaw officers were being harassed. With input from PRC and bylaw and the OPP, a plan was devised and staffing arrangements made to facilitate this plan. Staff were instructed to informally restrict parking to the following streets: Niagara, Huron, Raglan, and Russell. by using pylons and barricades. The parking lot near the water treatment plant was to be used as a non-resident lot, which required attendants to monitor the entry of vehicles. Signage was also ready to inform patrons if the park was to reach capacity. This plan was a test pilot to see if we could resolve some of the issues and complaints. On Sunday, staff executed the Sunset Park plan, which seemed to be successful. Over the weekend, Millennium Park also experienced the same overcrowding and parking issues. On Sunday, a bylaw increased the enforcement to reduce these issues, and it is an area that we are considering further actions. Having personally been on site at Sunset Park on Sunday, I was told a handful of times by residents that it was nice to be able to leave the park and come back knowing that there would be a parking spot for them when they returned. We also received 100 or so thumbs up as residents drove by and seeing the sign of the resident only parking lot. Positive comments like, "It's about time, this is great, I'm so happy that I don't have to drive around and find a spot." We were also asked by almost every person using the lot if this program was going to be in place for the rest of the summer. But what truly demonstrated to me the positive response was when an elderly resident was so happy that you could hear the emotion in her voice that she had a parking spot when she arrived. Bylaw will shortly be bringing forward a staff report recommending street parking restrictions in this and other areas. The recent RFP determined a company that would support the town's ability to implement and update its paid parking capabilities. While this has been slated to roll out as soon as practical, it has been scheduled some months away. Staff across multiple departments are considering a go-forward option to bring council related to COVID considerations targeting SIC on Wednesday for an update and potential decisions or plans. Many options have been suggested, including the following, but this is not an exhaustive list. Continuing with interim arrangements for portions of that, overall park closure times, implementing a payment for parking, closure of some parking areas and strict enforcement of parking areas elsewhere, closing St. Lawrence Street or making it a one-way road, limiting local traffic only, redoing chalk circles in the parks, closing Heritage Drive to vehicles, increasing enforcement and less emphasis on education first. Thank you, Chair. That's my update.
No doubt we have some questions from members of our committee on this update for you, Director Milanovic. Anyone? Okay. Oh, there's the Mayor. Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mel, for that report, and also thank you to staff for turning a very short timeline to implement the changes that you did on Sunday. I've certainly received a lot of positive feedback. And I know you're going to come back on Wednesday. I guess the questions that come to my mind is just our ability with the staff that we have now. How much ability do we have to increase the monitoring down at the park or the two parks? And to if we were to put in closures or closed time periods, would that staff be able to handle that type of measure?
Director Milanovic.
Through you, Chair. We're limited on resources as it is. We would have to either redeploy or bring back recall staff to assist and or hire.
Okay, and then just as a follow-up, and I know you'll be coming back on Wednesday, Director Milanovic, but so it sounds to me then that for a number of the recommendations that you've tabled, and it wasn't an exhaustive list, that we're probably going to be looking at increased manpower or staffing by redeploying to be able to put those types of measures in place.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we will look to redeploy or rehire or recall.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Anyone else with a question? Vice Chair Comey.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair, and through you to Director Milanovic. So just again, echoing how impressed and happy our residents were with the timely response. I was pleased to be part of a meeting of the Sunset Point Residents Association just yesterday, along with Chair Doherty and Vice Chair Hamlin. Sorry, my dog came in the room. Where I'm sure you'll hear from Councillor Doherty all the recommendations and feedback from the residents of Sunset when it comes to parking. I suppose my first question is that one lot off Raglan still designated locals only?
Through you, Chair. I think it was a test pilot for Sunday. If you ask me if it was successful, I believe so, but we'll wait and determine that through department heads.
Okay, and thank you. As a follow-up, through you, Madam Chair, CEO Skinner, I had expressed this question in email yesterday. So it is public land. And so what we've seen other municipalities straight up close, or we're hearing from Director Milanovic, a paid parking scenario. Pardon my ignorance, I've never heard of a scenario of taking public space and carving it out for local only use. So I'm just trying to help understand questions I'm getting from residents under how do we respond to concerns about doing that?
CAO Skinner.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think that is a really valid question and that we need to do some more work on before Wednesday's discussion with the Strategic Initiatives Committee. I think that COVID times are a little bit different even than regular times. So I have to want to look at that question both from the perspective of wanting to make sure that people have access to green space near their homes, as well as the overall general powers of a municipality. Surprisingly, perhaps, or maybe it was good, I think that it seemed that both people from afar and people who lived close by had a generally good acceptance of the concept in practice, but I would like to further follow up, and that's an excellent question.
I appreciate that, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, because in general, and we've talked about this before, early on in COVID, a division of us versus them, and who is local and who isn't, can be a very slippery slope. And I know it's really fun to get a parking space, and I appreciate all those concerns, but you know, it made me think about, I know we're going to talk about it later, like eventually we're going to have Harborview splash pad, and that's going to be a hot spot in the summers, and everybody's going to feel like they should be the first one to get there. So it's just something to be cautious about setting a precedent when it comes to public space. So I appreciate, I respect you saying you will follow up on that.
Director Skinner.
Thank you.
CAO Skinner, sorry.
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to make a brief comment on that point, because I think it is an important one. Collingwood is a welcoming community, and every single person that I've talked to on council and certainly on staff believe that as a primary tenet. It's in our vision for the community, and we're all working toward that. I think the thing for me that made this more palatable, at least during COVID times and potentially in the future, is that we have not restricted all access to the sites. We're looking at, and I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say half of the parking, for example, being in this case, special COVID case for local people who need local access to green space. And there would be no intent to close any public facility from the public. It was just really a recognition that enough taxpayers get enough use of the local sites. So we will keep that point in mind that Councillor Comey, you had just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful response.
Thank you. I would hope, of course, that excuse me, that you would take into consideration that there would not be any more than 7 members of that Ratepayers Association at that meeting if there was 3 council members, because currently we have, under the emergency orders, no more than 10 people are allowed to gather. So I hope that you weren't breaking the rules, Councillor Comey.
I don't know, Councilor McLeod, I didn't organize the meeting. I just wanted to get some margarita time quickly. So I didn't take a head count, but I'm sure George Powell can fill you in.
Yes, well, I'm sure we all want to set a good example. Any other questions for Director Milanovic? Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, I think we have some comments from someone in the public. Chair Almas or Clerk Almas?
Yes, through the chair, we do have a comment from Matthew Pretty. He is indicating send them to the Legion parking lot with more signs. People, why not send them there? How does this sound?
Through you, Chair, we were directing people that were asking where they could find parking when there was no other parking available. We did mention to go over to the Legion and park there.
Ah, right. Super. And so any other questions, I think, from our attendees, or is that doesn't happen actually with an update from staff, does it, Clerk Almas? Okay. So with no other questions from staff, we will thank Acting Director Milanovic and move on to public delegations. Acting CEO Skinner.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I should have put my sign up a little more quickly, but I did want to recognize that Director Milanovic actually spent the entire day at the park, at the residents and property owners and business owners lot. So he has that was an unexpected day at work for him, where he took on some unusual activities, and I wanted to recognize that level of dedication, and that a number of, I think, very good judgment was used in making sure that people who had physical disabilities, for example, were allowed in the lot, recognizing that a lot of things beside a driver's license could indicate that someone was in fact a property or business owner within the town. And I think helped us to gather really good information on that one-day pilot that we may or may not repeat. But thank you, Director Milanovic.
Director Milanovic, you have a comment?
Yes, through you, Chair. I will also say, in my 26 years in working in municipalities, Sunday was one of the days that I was really proud of being a municipal employee, receiving all the thank yous and all the, the positive feedback from the public, as in the residents, sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up on the agenda, public delegations, and I'll turn to the clerk and see if there is any member of the public who wishes to speak.
So thank you, Chair McLeod. At this point, we allow public delegations. So if there's any member that is attending that wishes to participate, you have approximately 5 minutes maximum to address the committee. And it has to be something relevant to the jurisdiction of the Corporate and Community Services meeting. At this point, it looks like Matthew Pretty would like to speak. So we can allow Matthew to speak.
Oh, hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Bob, give me the peace sign. Or Councillor McLeod, can you give me the peace sign if you see me or hear me?
I can hear you, and here's the peace sign.
Okay, we're on delay then. Oh, okay, I'll tone down here. Okay, 1 second. Oh, God. Oh, here, I'll turn the TV off. It's wrecking it. Guys, this has been an awful time. And as if mental health isn't at the front of all of this, because, being trapped inside can be really difficult. And I know a lot of people are going through this. I've heard some really challenging, some distressing remarks from people. And I know one fellow in town who's been having a tough time even before the social isolation. And I think we need to approach people with caution and really slow things down when it comes to commerce. asking people to wear protective equipment. Blue Mountain has a great system right now. They have like ambassadors at Blue Mountain walking around available to help people. What could we do through Town of Collingwood to help people with questions regarding COVID-19 and our municipal accessibility? By the way, that was a brilliant presentation, Margaret Adolf. I caught that at the beginning of the meeting. What could we do in relation to being available in person during this pandemic? Because I have a feeling this is going to go on till December, full closure. Could we have ambassadors and people that can be approachable, that are not law enforcement? What can we do to help be more available to general public and visitors? That's my question regarding de-escalating mental health and, getting outside and connecting in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt Pretty, for bringing that question to us. I'm not entirely sure to whom I would direct that question, although I do know that there was discussion regarding in our the task force chaired by the mayor. There was discussion of ambassadors, but I believe that was more about business downtown rather than interventions or anything like that.
Oh, I know. And really, it's sort of like as adults, we have to kind of clue in and figure out just how to remain calm, stay connected. But some people do not have family in this town, or, visitors that are speeding through town. And guys, like, we could have a second wave here that is even more impactful. Like, I remember speaking to town council on the 4th of March, and this is a big what if. And I'm literally just like, I'm shocked. I'm kind of in a state of shock, to tell you the truth. And we just need to be able to reach out in person or through something more direct. We have to get through this barrier, this glass barrier of total digitalism, because again, my remarks on the 4th at SIC was like, it's one thing to access internet and use it responsibly. It's another thing to be like overusing and not really connecting at all. That's what we're going through right now. We need to break the glass and we need to say, hey, let's get our community back and let's connect, but let's do it safely and in a way that's not escalatory when people do have breakdowns because honestly, who is not in shock with what's happening? Because if you're not, you've got a well-paying job, because all of us waiting for checks at the end of the month, it's a long month, It is. It's a long month. So this is my concern. It really is.
Thank you so much for bringing that.
Okay, well, think about it for a bit. You don't have to answer right away. Just take that back to the board, and really, we need to break the glass, and we need to reconnect, and we need to get through this cage that we've all been put into, and that's exactly what's going on right now. Thank you for taking my phone call.
Yeah.
Have a good day. And remember, we are not to be experimented on. If you want to get a vaccine, pay for it. Like, what if you don't want to take the vaccine?
Well, I don't think that's under the of this committee, Matt. So we will take that
to tell you the truth, I'm a bit annoyed, and I just don't know what to think of it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cut me off. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other members of the public who are looking to speak? Clerk Olmes.
Yes, it looks like we have Jack Marley wishing to speak, so we will allow him to talk.
Jack, are you there?
Hi there, I'm here now. Thank you. I didn't realize I'd get a mute button. I just want to speak to that Maple Street issue that was brought up on the Trails Committee minutes that Councillor Comey mentioned, or Vice Chair Comey. Pardon me, that came out at our last meeting as a draft plan, an idea that was discussed. And we met with, a couple of us met on site during the past week or two and plotted out how it might be. We now have to go to see John Vellick from engineering, and we are hoping to get on next Monday's strategic planning, not strategic planning. I forget what it is, which planning committees, I get them all mixed up. But anyhow, pardon me, I've lost my voice. But the idea is to go forward with a quiet street plan for Maple Street and see if there's any legs to it that would be approved by that committee and then carried on to council ultimately.
Super. And did you have anything else to say, Jack?
No, not really. I just wanted to thank Councillor Comey for mentioning the trail captains and Bob Miller, who was on the committee before, and he's agreed to stay on. He's done a terrific job keeping all those people engaged and making our trails what they are. So there'll be more coming up very soon on other improvements to the trails. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for taking the time to call in when you heard something interesting that you wanted to respond to. We appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Clerk Almost is at the end of our delegations. Does it appear?
There is other attendees, but it looks like nobody else wishes to speak to the committee at this time.
Wonderful. So we move into item number 11, which is other business. And I know that we have a fair dose of other business today. And I believe I'm going to start with, well, let's see who has other business. I don't want to make assumptions. Any members of the committee want to bring anything up under other business? Councillor Madigan.
Cool. Thank you very much. Just before I make my notice of motion, I just want to bring, it's to do with paid parking down at Sunset Point. I just want to make everybody aware that in discussion with staff, paid parking has been a really, really big part of the planning considerations since I first brought it to council in 2017. And at that time, we just didn't have the parking lot structures where we could park. Our main focus back then was on safety of the children. We found back then that people would drive down to Sunset Point, park on the south side, and just run to the water. And the kids were so excited. So I wanted to bring a safety factor. But back in 2017, well before COVID hit, and other municipalities have done this, I wanted to bring standardized paid parking. We have turned into a tourism town, and we get a lot of people from other areas coming in, and there's no reason why our taxpayers should have to pay for the excess garbage pickup and other things. I love everybody that goes down to Sunset Point, and I want them to continue. But Sunset Point Park is a very unique in the way it's integrated kind of within our local neighborhoods. So we need to be very, very careful that the measures we take to look after the community park really don't adversely affect the residents nearby, hence parking on other streets and then walking down. We have to be very careful to tell people to park at the Legion because that is private parking. And if something happens on private property and we've told them to park there, we might unfortunately be named type of deal if there is an accident. But that being said, my notice is that council direct staff to review a paid parking policy at Sunset Point and to explore if there is a possibility to implement a pilot project in 2020 via the advent of new technology. So that is what I'm asking for, and I appreciate you letting me speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe we also had Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So talk about late breaking news. One of the residents from Sunset Point just sent me a text saying they have residents knocking at their door asking to use the washroom. So that's supposedly the washrooms are locked at Sunset Point. So through you, Madam Chair, to Director Milanovic, you are, this is actually the second resident to tell me such a story. Another one told me they had an elderly person come to their door, you know, sort of begging to get some relief. What are the hours, please, for the washroom at Sunset Point?
Through you, Chair. The hours of the washroom are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And as a follow-up to that, please, has those always been our hours for the washrooms down there?
Through you, Chair. No, just during the reopening.
So they're more limited or more extended?
Through your Chair, they are limited.
Okay. can you help expand on that as the rationale as to why?
Once again, through you, Chair, they are limited due to resources. We can look at expanding them through discussions with department heads.
Okay, so on that topic, maybe then for further consideration when it comes back to department heads, then if we're speaking to local times, like when our residents tend to get down there would be after work. So if they've, you know, just got off at 5 and they're headed down with the family, and now this is the second resident who's notified me, you know, that they've been asked this, and it's a really tricky thing to do in a COVID world you want to, you know, help somebody out in a desperate situation, but it's a tricky situation. So I suppose I would make the ask, and if we could revisit it as soon as possible, extending those hours, and in the now, if I could ask, please, as soon as possible, we get that messaging out to our residents then, so that they know if they're heading down best they can. Do you happen to know, Director Monbit, is that at both restrooms? Is that by the chipper as well? Or does that one stay open until the chipper closes, or it closes at 6 too?
Through you, Madam Chair,
Yes.
they both close at roughly 6 p.m. So it might be 6:30 or so. Usually there's a lineup and staff wait till the lineup disperses.
Right. So talking about, just further to that point, talking about accessibility tonight, that beautiful presentation we heard, you mentioning how many elderly folks, I mean, this is a prime time to go down and watch the sunset. So we've seen problems in other municipalities where, I mean, it's just a need to go, and we don't want to have a further health problem by people simply using the washrooms out of doors, right? Not hygienic either, but I completely sympathize with your challenges with staff. So I think we need to revisit those hours, and in the short term, very much let our residents know the hours of the washroom. If it's okay with you, Madam Chair, I do have I have another topic.
Sure.
Director Milanovic, Councillor Doherty did such a nice job of addressing this concern, and it's a safety concern because of the closure of really the secret trail, right? And she captures it so nicely in her email. I just want to reiterate her concern, and I echo this, as I'm sure most of council does. She had written in to say, now that the asphalted trail from the sidewalk in front of the courthouse to the west side of Sunset Point is completely underwater and closed, the only option for cyclists and pedestrians to get from this location to Sunset is a narrow dirt path that runs directly beside the Pretty River Parkway, Niagara Street. And she goes on to say how deeply concerned she is about the safety of this path, as am I, as are many, many, many of our residents who are trying to navigate their way down to this very popular park area. And what we're really asking for is some, best we can, immediate action of some type, because it is such a dire safety concern. So would you be able to kindly share with us what Parks has been looking at?
Director Milanovic?
To Madam Chair, we understand that there's an issue with the active residents commuting from downtown or downtown to Sunset Point with the existing trail unpassable in some areas. People are using the narrow dirt path along Huron Street that is not safe. We understand that. Public Works and PRC are working together to establish a better path along the roadside. So in the short term, while PRC investigates options to improve the trail, the long-term PRC and engineering are looking at the option of a sidewalk that connects to the 3-meter trail on the west end and a 1.5-meter sidewalk on the east end. Due to the road widening being completed as part of the Park Ridge office development, we would not be able to install the sidewalk until late fall at the earliest. Therefore, in the short-term measures will be Public Works staff are going to cut back the undergrowth alongside the road. Park staff are going to trim any low branches and also lay screenings down to widen that path. And I believe it'll be anywhere from 4.5 to 6 meters wide along that area.
Okay, that sounds like a good start. I'm glad to hear you're able to take some action. I know there's so many things coming at your entire team at once, so it's truly appreciated. Madam Chair, I had one last update, and so through you to Director Milanovic, as I had mentioned, I was going to ask, it's our last meeting before summer break. could we kindly share with our residents an update on PRC's 3 capital projects? So this would be the Harborview Splash Pad. I bet that would be really well used right now. The Sunset Park Playground, and a little thing called Fisher Field.
Director Blanovich?
Through you, Madam Chair, Sunset Point Playground, the pavilion washrooms, they're going to go out to tender soon with construction anticipated in the fall. As for the playground, the design has been finalized and is expected that site preparations will start this fall and the playground structure will be installed in the spring of 21. In addition, the vision of the Sunset Playground is that it will be highly accessible for the first time in history of this facility. The vision has been built in partnership with the Children's Treatment Network. In the coming weeks, Council will have the opportunity to do an on-site walkthrough of the Sunset Point Playground design. Also, the Harvest Table Pavilion will begin construction tomorrow. A final on-site meeting was held today with the donor, Ray Smith, who is building the structure in memory of his son, Tom, who passed away last year. As for the Alwyn Water Park, the underground infrastructure tender is going out soon with construction to begin in the fall. Earthworks for the water play area should be able to start in the fall and finishing in spring of 21. Fisher Field tender package is ready to go, but unfortunately we are still waiting on the funding announcement from the province, federals, to know which direction we're going. That's the update.
Does that assist, Vice Chair Comey?
It does. Thank you so much. So on the first 2 updates, those are all very, very positive. In general, are all these updates going into Engage Collingwood? I think that would be really helpful to our residents to be able to continue to monitor progress there. And as a follow-up, that last I understood all along when it came to Fisher Field and the grant is that we were building out a package that allowed respondents to deal with that if-then scenario, that the bid package and the progress was not going to be impeded by knowing whether we were a grant recipient or not. Has that subsequently changed? Are we holding the package?
Director Milanovic? Oh,
Sure. The first question was, sorry, could you repeat it?
Yeah, the Engage Collingwood. Are we going to put all these updates on Engage Collingwood?
That's a great question, and yes, we will be.
Awesome. And then the second one was just that if-then scenario when it came to the grant for Fisher and the bid package.
So I might be able to help with that one, if that's helpful.
Collver, can you assist?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So the bid package, the tender package is ready in its biggest form. If we find out we're not successful, we strip it down to the smaller form and we send it out to tender. So basically both tenders are ostensibly ready to go. But council made a decision that, and obviously with staff's recommendation, that we wait to see if we're able to build the larger facility based on provincial and federal funding. So we know that the matter is passed from the province to the feds, and now it's up to the feds to get back with a final decision, but we're obviously in their hands and they're prioritizing as they can in strange times. But so we are on hold until we hear back from the province. So we're checking in periodically to see where they're at in terms of decision making.
Okay, so we've heard nothing back at this point if we have been successful at the provincial level.
No, so through you, Chair, what the province has told us is that the process is now moved to the federals, but we don't know whether we were successful or not. We don't know what their recommendation to the federal government was, so we don't know one way or the other still at this point. Because it's a two-tier fund, both the federal and provincial government have to be in agreement. And again, not really sure exactly how that decision-making process works, but we know that we were told that the province has done their work, and now we're waiting on the federal government.
Okay, and did they give any timeline at all? 2 years, 2 months?
unfortunately, they won't give us timelines because, again, they're working at things as the best they can under the conditions we're all working through. So no, they haven't given us a time frame. And our contact, our administrator, is through the province, so she's not even connected to the federal. She just can tell us sort of where it is at in the process, but she can't sort of administrate the federal level as well.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Thank you, Vice Chair Comey. Were there any other business? Oh, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to read in my notice of motion, please. Whereas the current fireworks bylaw 2012-064 permits consumer fireworks to occur on Victoria Day, Canada Day, and New Year's Eve from dusk to 11 p.m., including the 3 days before and the 3 days after these dates. And whereas noise emitted from fireworks can have a negative effect on domestic animals and can cause a traumatic impact to veterans suffering with PTSD and our refugee community in addition to potential fire hazard. Now therefore be it resolved that Council direct a bylaw amendment be prepared to limit the use of consumer fireworks for the specific dates of Victoria Day and Canada Day, removing New Year's Eve, and exemptions to the bylaw continue to be permitted through the approval process by the fire chief or designate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. And to the clerk, these two notices of motion which have come forward tonight, each of these will be dealt with in a council meeting, which is scheduled for July the
20th.
20th. Thank you very much. Is there any other business for this committee? Seeing none. Where is that sheet? Here we go. Moved by Councillor Madigan that the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee be hereby adjourned. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.